Every step you take loads your body with a force roughly equal to 1.5 times your body weight. Over the course of an average day, that adds up to somewhere between 3 and 5 million newtons of cumulative force passing through your feet, ankles, knees, and hips. Your body was designed to handle this. 3 million years of bipedal evolution produced a mechanical system of extraordinary elegance, a spring-loaded arch, a shock-absorbing ankle, a hip complex capable of redistributing load across multiple joints simultaneously. But here is what almost nobody tells you. The way most modern humans actually walk. The specific pattern of ground contact, the angle at which the foot strikes, the surfaces they walk on, and the footwear they wear while doing it, may be quietly dismantling that elegant system one step at a time. Not in a way you will feel today, not in a way you will necessarily feel next year, but in a way your knees, hips, and lower back will eventually make impossible to ignore. And the most counterintuitive part is this. The people most affected are often not sedentary. They are the walkers, the ones who took the health advice seriously, put on their trainers, and committed to their daily steps. And they are accumulating joint damage in a pattern that has no precedent in 3 million years of human evolutionary history. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Consider a man who spent 32 years as a postal worker in a mid-sized city in the north of England. By any reasonable measure, he was an active person his entire working life. On a typical day, he covered 12 to 15 kilometers on foot across pavements and residential streets. When he retired at 63, he continued walking. Shorter routes, a more leisurely pace, good supportive trainers, the kind his GP recommended. By 67, both his knees required significant medical intervention. His hips were compromised. His lower back had become a source of daily limitation rather than occasional discomfort. His doctors were not particularly surprised. His family were not particularly surprised. A lifetime of walking, they said. The mileage adds up. But from an evolutionary perspective, that explanation is deeply unsatisfying because human beings are the product of 3 million years of selection pressure that specifically favored the capacity to walk and walk extensively without cumulative joint destruction. The mileage was never supposed to add up this way. Something changed, and the change is not what most people assume. I'm Daniel Lieberman, Harvard professor and evolutionary biologist. I've spent my career studying how the human body evolved to run, eat, think, and survive. Now, I'm here to help you understand why your ancient biology struggles in a radically modern world, and how to work with it instead of against it. Welcome to the evolution. If you want to understand how your ancient body navigates the modern world, this channel explores exactly that. Subscribe if you are genuinely curious about the biology behind everyday life. Let me begin with what the foot actually is. The human foot is not a simple weight-bearing platform. It is a dynamic mechanical system of 26 bones, 33 joints, and over 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments, a structure of such engineering complexity that biomechanists are still mapping its full functional range. At the center of this system is the longitudinal arch, a curved spring that stores and releases elastic energy with every step, reducing the metabolic cost of walking by absorbing and returning ground reaction force in a way that no engineered material has yet matched. This arch did not evolve for aesthetics. It evolved because human ancestors needed to cover large distances efficiently over irregular terrain, carrying loads across the full span of a physically demanding life. And it works in a specific way. When a healthy foot contacts the ground in its evolved pattern, landing toward the middle or front of the foot, allowing the arch to compress gradually and the ankle to flex smoothly, impact force is distributed across a wide area of compliant tissue, absorbed progressively, and returned as elastic recoil. The knee receives a gradual, tolerable loading curve. The hip stabilizers activate in sequence. The entire system functions as a coherent, load-sharing mechanism. Analyses of barefoot populations in East Africa, communities where footwear is minimal or entirely absent, consistently reveal this midfoot or forefoot contact pattern as the default human walking gait. It is not a technique anyone teaches. It is the gait the unshod foot naturally adopts, because the sensory feedback from the ground makes any other pattern immediately and clearly uncomfortable. That sensory feedback is not incidental. It is the system. And this is precisely where the modern walking mistake begins. The modern athletic shoe, particularly the walking shoe, which is specifically marketed as supportive, protective, and health-promoting, is built around a thick, cushioned heel designed, as the marketing reliably explains, to absorb the shock of impact and protect the joints. But here is the biological reality that the marketing does not address. The cushioned heel does not protect the heel strike, it enables it. Without heel cushioning, striking the ground hard with the back of the foot, heel first, with the leg relatively straight, as most modern walkers do on pavement, is uncomfortable. The heel bone transmits impact force directly and rapidly to the ankle, knee, and hip when it contacts a hard surface without the progressive loading that the arch and forefoot provide. The nervous system registers this as something to avoid. Unshod walkers on hard surfaces instinctively shift contact toward the midfoot, shortening the effective impact and distributing the load more favorably. The cushioned heel removes that signal entirely. It makes the hard heel strike on a hard surface feel comfortable. And in doing so, it allows a gait pattern to repeat thousands of times daily that the human joint system was never designed to sustain. Every heel strike on pavement produces what biomechanists call a transient impact peak, a sharp, rapid spike in ground reaction force that travels up the skeleton before the body's natural shock absorption systems have time to engage. In barefoot walkers on natural terrain, this peak is small or absent. In cushioned shoe walkers on pavement, it is consistently measurable, consistently larger, and present with every single step. Multiply that impact peak by 15,000 steps per day, by 365 days per year, by 30 years of consistent walking, the kind a conscientious, health-conscious person does throughout middle adulthood and into retirement. And this creates a problem no one anticipated when the modern walking shoe was designed. The specific pathology that accumulates from repetitive heel strike impact loading is not random. It concentrates in the structures that bear the disproportionate force of that sharp transient peak. The medial compartment of the knee, the cartilage of the hip joint, and the intervertebral discs of the lumbar spine. These are precisely the structures that show the highest rates of age-related degeneration in modern industrialized populations. And here is what makes this genuinely counterintuitive. These are not the structures that show the highest degeneration rates in populations with minimal footwear use. Comparative skeletal analyses of pre-industrial and barefoot habituated populations show markedly lower rates of medial knee osteoarthritis and lumbar disc degeneration relative to comparable age groups in industrialized societies. The difference cannot be attributed simply to overall activity levels, because the barefoot populations are often more physically active, not less. The difference, the evidence increasingly suggests, is in the pattern of loading, not the volume. Let's step back for a moment. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. It is not the number of steps that determines joint health over a lifetime. It is the mechanical quality of each individual step. An active person walking millions of steps in a pattern the joint system was never designed for may be accumulating more damage than a less active person covering the same distance on variable terrain with a gait the skeleton recognizes. That is a deeply counterintuitive claim, but it follows directly from what the evolutionary record and the biomechanical evidence, taken together, consistently show, which leads to a question most people have never thought to ask. We have established that the human foot is a spring-loaded mechanical system designed for a specific pattern of ground contact. That modern footwear enables a heel strike gait, producing a repetitive impact peak the joint system was not shaped to absorb, and that this pattern, silently, cumulatively, over decades, may be the primary driver of the joint degeneration most people attribute simply to age or to the inevitable cost of being active. But there is another dimension of the walking mistake that is equally important and that receives almost no attention in conventional health advice. The human gluteal complex is, relative to body size, the largest muscle group in the primate lineage. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, have comparatively small, underdeveloped gluteal muscles. Humans have enormous ones. And the reason for this disparity is directly tied to the demands of bipedal walking on variable terrain. Specifically, the gluteus maximus plays a critical stabilizing role during the single-leg stance phase of walking, the moment when all body weight passes through one leg as you push into the next stride. On variable terrain, particularly on inclines and irregular ground, the glute activates forcefully to control the pelvis, extend the hip, and protect the knee from collapsing inward under load. It is an anti-collapse mechanism that evolution refined across millions of years of walking on surfaces that were never flat. On a perfectly flat, paved surface at a slow and leisurely cadence, in a cushioned shoe that removes ground feel, the gluteal muscles activate at a fraction of the level they evolved to sustain. Electromyographic studies comparing walking on flat pavement versus moderate natural terrain consistently show significantly reduced glute activation on flat surfaces. The body, quite rationally, does not recruit muscles it does not need in the immediate context. But the consequence of chronically underactivated glutes during walking is not simply a strength deficit. It is a load redistribution problem. The force that the gluteal complex would otherwise absorb and control transfers to the knee, the lumbar spine, and the hip flexors, structures that were never designed to carry that load alone. The postal worker spent 32 years walking on flat pavements in cushioned shoes at a comfortable pace. His glutes were present. They were simply never asked to fully do their job. And the structures that compensated for their absence paid the price across 3 decades of daily repetition. This is what the walking mistake actually consists of. Not a single dramatic error. A quiet, daily, structural underutilization of the very muscles evolution built specifically to protect the joints that walking would otherwise destroy. Your body is not betraying you by developing joint pain from walking. It is responding with precision to the mechanical signals it is receiving. Change the signals, and you change the response. Here's an idea that contradicts one of the most deeply held assumptions in modern health culture. The walking shoe, the thick-soled, heavily cushioned, motion-controlled shoe universally recommended by physicians, physiotherapists, and public health campaigns, may be one of the primary enablers of the joint problems it was designed to prevent. This is not an argument that shoes are inherently harmful. It is a more specific claim that the design features we associate with protection, thick heel cushioning, elevated heel height, rigid sole, systematically alter the gait mechanics of the humans who wear them in ways that remove the natural feedback systems, which would otherwise keep those mechanics within the range the joint system can tolerate. The heel lift built into almost every walking shoe, even apparently flat ones, places the foot in a slight permanent plantar flexion, subtly shortening the Achilles tendon over time and shifting the body's center of mass forward in a way that encourages the very heel striking the cushioning then needs to manage. It is a system that quietly compounds itself with every year of use. And it is recommended with complete sincerity by people who genuinely want to help. That is not the issue. The issue is that the recommendation was never grounded in an evolutionary understanding of what the foot is, what it was built to do, and what happens when you remove the sensory environment it was designed to operate within. The walking shoe is not the villain of this story. It is a perfectly logical cultural response to a real problem, but it is a cultural solution to a biological problem. And like most such solutions, it has generated its own quiet downstream consequences. If you have spent years walking conscientiously for your health and still find your joints complaining in ways that feel unfair, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not doing something wrong. You are doing exactly what the culture told you to do. The mismatch is not between you and your body. It is between modern footwear design and the evolutionary architecture of the foot it sits on. The goal here is not to convince you to discard your shoes. The goal is to use what the evolutionary record tells us about optimal foot and gait mechanics to make intelligent adjustments that work with the biology rather than against it. Several evidence-grounded principles emerge. None of them are extreme. All of them are accessible. The first is surface variability. The single most impactful change most urban walkers can make is to regularly include walking on surfaces that are not flat and paved. Grass, gravel, moderate inclines, woodland paths, uneven park terrain. Any surface that requires the foot to adapt, the ankle to negotiate, and the gluteal complex to stabilize will engage the mechanical systems that flat pavement systematically bypasses. The joints benefit not from less walking, but from more varied walking. That distinction matters enormously. The second is cadence awareness. Research on walking biomechanics consistently shows that slightly increasing step rate, taking somewhat shorter, quicker steps rather than long, slow strides, reduces the peak loading on the knee during each footfall. A higher cadence distributes the same distance across more frequent, smaller impacts. This is closer to the natural rhythm of walking on variable terrain, where stride length adjusts constantly to the surface rather than settling at whatever feels comfortable on flat ground. The third is progressive foot exposure, gradually reintroducing the foot to feedback-rich surfaces, spending time barefoot indoors, walking on grass without shoes, or transitioning slowly toward footwear with lower heel elevation and thinner soles, begins to restore the sensory environment the gait system evolved to operate within. This process must be gradual. Tendons and connective tissues adapt slowly. But the direction of adaptation, when the approach is intelligent and patient, is toward the gait pattern the foot was designed for. The fourth is deliberate hip and glute loading. walking up moderate inclines, climbing stairs rather than using escalators, carrying light loads on uneven ground, these choices are not symbolic. They are direct invitations to the gluteal complex to engage at the activation level it evolved to sustain. Each such choice incrementally addresses the load redistribution problem that chronically underactivated glutes quietly produce across years of otherwise conscientious walking. The pattern across all four principles is identical to the pattern that appears throughout evolutionary biology. The body adapts to the demands placed upon it. Provide variable, load-bearing, feedback-rich, mechanically diverse demands, and it responds with resilience. Smooth the surfaces, cushion the feedback, flatten the terrain, and the competence the system was built to maintain gradually recedes. Let me return to where we began. The walking mistake that is quietly affecting so many conscientious, active people is not a failure of effort or consistency. It is a failure of evolutionary context, a mismatch between the mechanical environment the human foot was designed for and the environment that modern footwear and urban infrastructure have substituted in its place. The cushioned heel enables the heel strike. The heel strike removes the arch's spring-loading function. The flat pavement removes the gluteal activation signal, and the result, accumulated across millions of steps, across decades of genuinely well-intentioned effort, is joint loading in a pattern the skeleton was never selected to absorb. This is not an argument against walking. Walking is one of the most health-supportive behaviors a human being can sustain. The evidence is deep and unambiguous, but walking on flat pavement in cushioned shoes at a slow pace with a heel-first gait pattern, day after day, decade after decade, is not quite the same thing as the walking the human body was built for. And the difference between those two things accumulates quietly in the joints in ways that only become visible when the damage is already substantial. The postal worker's joints did not fail because he walked too much. They failed because he walked in a pattern on surfaces in footwear that the system those joints belong to was never designed to encounter. Your body is not wearing out from use. It is responding to the specific mechanical signals it receives with the precision that 3 million years of selection pressure produced. Give it signals it recognizes: variable terrain, feedback-rich surfaces, natural cadence, purposeful load, and it will respond with the resilience it was built to demonstrate. That capacity does not disappear with age. It simply waits to be correctly addressed. The human foot is one of evolution's most sophisticated achievements. 26 bones, 33 joints, a spring-loaded arch refined over 3 million years to make long-distance bipedal movement efficient, resilient, and sustainable across a full human lifespan. We placed it inside a cushioned box, walked it across flat concrete, and told ourselves we were taking care of it. The evolutionary record suggests a more nuanced picture. The foot does not simply need support. It needs challenge. It needs feedback. It needs the irregular, variable, load-rich sensory environment it's spent millions of years developing the competence to navigate. Remove that environment, however well-intentioned the removal, and the competence gradually recedes, taking joint health with it. Small, consistent choices: a grass path instead of pavement, stairs instead of an escalator, a minute of barefoot time on varied ground, a slightly quicker stride on a gentle incline, are not trivial concessions to idealism. They are invitations to the body's most ancient mechanical intelligence to do precisely what it was built to do. The walking mistake is quiet, but so is the correction. And unlike the damage, the correction does not take decades to begin. Your foot knows what it needs. The question is simply whether the surfaces you give it allow it to remember. In the next video, we examine another quiet mismatch, one that sits at the intersection of human spinal evolution and the design of the modern chair. The chair has been called one of the most consequential inventions in human history, not for the convenience it provides, but for the biological cost it silently extracts from a spinal system that evolution never prepared for it. The evidence is genuinely surprising and deeply relevant to anyone who spends the majority of their waking hours seated. I'll see you there.